She didn't look like a killer that night. She looked like a mother who'd run out of places to scream. As flames tore through a Dubai penthouse and a powerful sheik begged for help, Olivia Hayes stood in the lobby below, shaking, staring upward, whispering one sentence that froze every guard around her. "He was going to take my daughter." It was the kind of line that forces a person to rethink everything they believe about right, wrong, and the thin thread that holds a parent's sanity together. Because the man burning above her wasn't just her lover. He was the man she thought had saved her family. So how does a blessing turn into a nightmare so fast? And what discovery pushes a quiet mother into the kind of choice that makes the world stop? Before we go any further, before we walk you through what really happened, welcome to Crime Deck, where we bring you daily true crime breakdowns. Thank you for your support. If you find our deep dives as gripping as we do, take a moment to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new case. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a warning. Now let's go back to how the nightmare began. Dubai's night sky glows like a polished jewel, but one tower breaks the illusion. On the 52nd floor, flames burst through tinted glass, painting violent streaks of orange across the waterfront skyline. The glow is so bright it bleeds across neighboring towers, casting frantic shadows of residents fleeing down marble staircases. Sirens scream through the humid night, growing louder as emergency crews race toward a penthouse known for extravagant galas, private meetings, and the man who pulled its strings. Inside that burning suite, heat twists metal railings and curls thick rugs into charred waves. Smoke moves like a living thing, rolling, choking, swallowing the luxury that once made the room feel untouchable. Karim Al-Saeed, the man people whispered about in awe and fear, stumbles through the haze. His silk robe clings to his skin as he claws toward the balcony, slamming his fists against the glass with a panic he has never shown another human being. His voice, usually smooth and controlled, rips into the night in a desperate scream that startles even the firefighters gathering below. Downstairs, the lobby erupts with chaos. Guests push past one another, heels scraping across the polished stone floors as staff shout instructions. But one figure stands perfectly still in the center of the storm. Olivia Hayes. Her clothes carry streaks of soot. Her breathing is shallow, uneven. Her hands tremble as though something inside them has just shattered and cannot be put back together. She doesn't try to leave. She doesn't collapse. She simply stares upward, her eyes locked on the fire above as if every crackle of heat is a memory she can't unsee. One security guard approaches her carefully, unsure if she's in shock or if she knows more than she's letting on. He looks at her hands, then her face. When he speaks, it's barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" Olivia doesn't answer immediately. She swallows hard, her voice cracking open when she finally speaks. "He was going to take my baby. He was going to ship her out like she was nothing." The guard freezes. The staff quiets. Even the chaos seems to pause as her words drift through the lobby, soft, broken, but heavy enough to shift the air around her. Two more guards move in gently, easing her arms behind her back. She doesn't resist. She doesn't protest. She closes her eyes the moment the cuffs click shut, as if she's preparing herself for what comes next. As if she knows the world will never hear the full truth the way she lived it. Outside the building, reporters slam microphones toward any official who steps into the open. Headlines fire across screens with blinding speed. American woman burns Dubai Sheik alive. Authorities probe possible motive. Teenage girl involved. Could this be more than a love affair? As firefighters battle the flames above, one of them emerges from the elevator carrying a charred tablet wrapped in cloth. Smoke still rises from its battered screen. Detectives gather around as the device flickers through damaged files, folders named with numbers, initials, abbreviations. One detective leans in, squinting. "Hold on, these aren't business ledgers." Another taps the cracked screen. "Look at this. These are transfers, human transfers." The words echo like a warning. The scene cuts back to Olivia as she sits inside the police vehicle, the door closing with a thud that feels final. Her soot-covered face is illuminated by the blue lights flashing across the windshield. She lifts her head just slightly, revealing eyes filled not with triumph, but with a grief so deep it looks almost unending. This woman didn't walk into a penthouse looking for revenge. She walked in trying to save her child. Her voice breaks through the silence once more. Not verbally, but through the way she stares forward, hollow and trembling, as if the rest of her life has already begun without her. What drove her to this point? What truth was she carrying alone? To understand why a mother walked into a penthouse with gasoline, we have to go back to the moment she believed her daughter had stepped into a brighter future. Before the world saw flames licking the Dubai skyline, before detectives whispered the word trafficking, there was just a woman trying to hold her life together with tired hands and a heart that refused to quit. Olivia Hayes built her world around her daughter long before danger had a name. After her husband died suddenly in a roadside collision, leaving her with a newborn who would later be diagnosed as blind, Olivia stepped into a role she never prepared for. She didn't collapse, she shifted. She learned how to stretch groceries through the week. She memorized bus routes to reach 2 jobs. She taught herself to sleep lightly because fear of failing her daughter kept her half awake most nights. And through every hardship, Arya grew, guided not by sight but by her mother's voice, her touch, her steady, loving presence. Arya learned the world with the pads of her fingers, sliding them across picture books Olivia described out loud until the pages felt like landscapes. She learned to measure rooms by counting her steps, learned how to listen to the mood of a crowd, learned how to sense her mother's stress even when Olivia tried to hide it behind a tired smile. Teachers called Arya exceptional. Not because she was blind, but because she refused to let blindness shrink her. She asked questions fearlessly. She solved problems quickly. She remembered everything. When Olivia sat in school meetings, hair pulled into a bun from rushing straight from work, teachers told her, "Your daughter is remarkable." Olivia always lowered her eyes and whispered, "She gets that from her dad," even though deep down she knew the truth. Arya's strength came from watching her mother fight every single day. Their apartment wasn't much, but it held warmth. The furniture didn't match, the carpet was worn, and every appliance groaned before working, but that home held laughter. On Friday nights, Olivia played audio-described movies so Arya could see with sound. On Saturday mornings, they made pancakes with lopsided edges and too much syrup. When money was short, Olivia made it feel like a game instead of a problem. On the hardest days, they sat on the edge of Olivia's bed and held hands until the fear passed. That bond became their shelter, a whole world built by 2 people who refused to break. But it wasn't easy. Olivia worked shifts that blurred together, sometimes standing so long her legs trembled when she finally sat. She washed dishes late at night to avoid waking her daughter. She kept her grief tucked behind her ribs because she didn't have time to fall apart. Even when exhaustion pinned her to the wall, she pushed through, because Arya depended on her. And because loving Arya gave her a reason to keep breathing. Over time, Olivia mastered the art of endurance. She woke before dawn. She walked to the bus stop with her coat pulled tight. She smiled through pain. She showed Arya how to live with pride, not pity. And Arya, in return, became her mother's anchor. On the days Olivia wanted to scream into a pillow, Arya would reach out and place a hand on her cheek as if she could feel the storm gathering there. "We're okay, Mom," she'd say softly, and Olivia always believed her, even when she wasn't sure. Their life had rhythm. It had meaning. It had a beauty shaped through hardship. But it also carried a quiet truth Olivia never said out loud. She was tired. Bone-deep tired. Tired of fighting for every inch, tired of juggling bills, tired of pretending she wasn't scared of the future, tired of feeling like help would never come. Still, she kept going, because mothers do that. And for a long time, she accepted that this was her life, simple, stretched thin, but filled with love. Nothing in her world hinted that danger was preparing its first move. Nothing warned her that a man she had never met was about to step into her routine and rearrange everything she held close. Nothing whispered that trust, once given, could become the doorway to the very nightmare she feared most. She believed stability was finally within reach. She believed she had survived the worst life could throw at her. She believed she and Arya were safe in their small corner of Atlanta. And then, without warning, someone unfamiliar walked into their path and shifted the ground beneath them one careful inch at a time. How does a stranger turn a mother's hope into the first step of a trap she never saw coming? Karim Al-Sayed didn't walk into Olivia's life like someone searching for a place to stay. He walked in like someone who was just passing through, someone whose world stretched across oceans, someone who had no reason to stop, yet he did. And maybe that's why he disarmed her so quickly. When you're used to being overlooked, attention from someone who doesn't need anything from you feels almost holy. Their first meeting happened on a forgettable weekday, the kind Olivia never paused to think about. The warehouse buzzed with forklifts and tired voices, and she was pushing through another long shift when Karim stepped into her aisle with a charity delegation shadowing him. He looked at workers the way most executives don't, making eye contact, listening, asking questions with a softness that didn't feel forced. When he asked Olivia how she balanced her hours with raising a blind teenager, she hesitated. She wasn't used to people asking anything beyond, "Can you finish this by 4?" Yet this stranger stood there waiting, not impatiently, but sincerely. And when she stumbled through an answer, he nodded like he respected her strength more than her struggle. He didn't linger long. He thanked her, wished her well, and moved along with his team. No flirtation, no overstepping, just a moment that left Olivia strangely seen. What followed didn't feel like pursuit, it felt like coincidence. A few days later, an overdue medical bill vanished from her account. She thought it was a glitch until she received a brief message from Karim's assistant explaining that he covered it to support her daughter's progress. He didn't call her. He didn't appear at her door. He simply helped, then stepped back. That distance made the gesture feel pure. Then came the night Olivia's car broke down on a dark stretch of highway. She wasn't stranded long before a clean black sedan rolled up beside her. The driver leaned out and said Mr. Al-Sayed had arranged transportation. She didn't know how he knew, and the driver didn't offer details, but in that moment, Olivia felt something she hadn't felt in years: relief. A few days later, Arya received a new assistive device at their apartment. Not extravagant, just thoughtful. It came with a note: "Every bright mind deserves the right tools." No signature, just intention. That was the rhythm of his presence. He appeared, he helped, and he disappeared again. He never imposed. He never hinted at wanting anything from them. And because he didn't hover, Olivia let him into her life piece by piece without recognizing she was doing it. When he did visit, he carried himself like a man accustomed to jet lag in boardrooms, someone whose schedule lived in different time zones. He spoke about Dubai casually, as if it were just another city on his route, never bragging, never flaunting, just existing on a higher rung of life without making her feel small. And that made him trustworthy. Arya responded to him quickly. She noticed how he modulated his voice for her, how he announced his presence so she never felt startled, how he described colors and stories she could hold on to. He never rushed her, never pitied her. He treated her like a girl with potential, not a disability. And Olivia, always protective, watched the way her daughter leaned toward his voice with growing confidence. Those were the moments that softened her. Those were the moments she let herself believe kindness still existed. But the turning point, the moment Karim shifted from helpful stranger to someone Olivia emotionally depended on, came with the scholarship. He arrived in the evening, dressed lightly, smelling faintly of travel, holding an envelope that carried more hope than Olivia had ever dared to pray for. When she opened it, her breath caught. Arya had been accepted into a prestigious European program for visually impaired teens, fully funded, completely legitimate, with placement dates and signatures that looked official because they were. Olivia didn't cry at first. She just stared at the paper, as if she needed the words to settle into her bones. When she finally looked up, Karim didn't smile in a showy way. He smiled like a man who was honored to change someone's life, and that sincerity cracked her open. She wept. Not softly, not politely. She cried with years of fear draining out of her at once. Arya clung to her, laughing and crying too, because for the first time she felt like the world wanted her. Karim stood back respectfully, watching the moment unfold without inserting himself into it. That restraint made him feel safe. It made Olivia believe he was simply a good man doing a good thing because he could. Over the next weeks, Karim's presence increased, but never in a way that felt invasive. He stopped by after meetings. He checked in from airports. He explained aspects of the scholarship process Olivia didn't understand, guiding her through forms she had no experience with. He always framed his involvement as support, not control. He never acted like he belonged in their home. That distance kept her guard down. Slowly, his voice became the one she trusted when she doubted herself. His explanations became the ones she leaned on when she felt lost. And that shift, the quiet migration of authority, happened so smoothly she didn't feel it. Then came the conversation that changed everything. Kareem suggested a short trip to Dubai for specialized evaluations before Arya began her program abroad. He explained it calmly, laying out why it mattered, how it would help her adjust, and why it was common for students in international programs. Olivia hesitated. Dubai felt far, unreachable. But Arya's excitement washed over her doubt. And when Kareem assured her that he would accompany them, handle logistics, and make the process painless, she said yes, not because she trusted the world, but because she trusted him. What happens when a mother mistakes a man's access for kindness and his distance for safety? If you're still with us, make sure you're subscribed to Crime Deck, hit the notification bell so you never miss a case like this, and share this episode with someone who understands how quickly trust can turn into something else. Now, let's move forward. They agreed to Dubai, but the moment Olivia said yes, something subtle shifted around her. It wasn't loud, it wasn't obvious. It showed up in small ways. Tiny changes in tone, new faces appearing in Kareem's orbit, whispers she wasn't meant to catch. And it all began with a dinner invitation she believed was nothing more than a kind gesture. A celebration, maybe. A chance to thank him for everything he'd done. She pressed her best blouse, fixed Arya's hair with soft fingers, and told herself this was just another step toward the future she'd prayed for. But the second she walked into that upscale hotel dining room, she felt out of place. The air carried a quiet stiffness. The men seated with Kareem rose politely, yet their eyes didn't rest on Olivia. They rested on Arya, studying her with a focus that made Olivia's breath tighten in her chest. Arya felt it too. She shifted closer to her mother, her hands searching for Olivia's arm, as if something inside her was warning her before she could name the feeling. Kareem introduced the men as colleagues, investors, people who supported educational partnerships. At first, Olivia nodded gratefully, trying to listen, trying to fit in, but their glances weren't friendly. One leaned toward Arya and with a strange smile said she had rare qualities. He didn't say it with admiration. He said it like he was describing a specimen. Arya stepped back instantly. Olivia's hand flew to her daughter's shoulder, her voice catching for a moment as she offered a polite response she didn't believe. Kareem laughed it off, brushing the comment aside, promising Olivia that the man meant no harm, that he was a little odd but harmless. It should have eased her. It didn't. The unease deepened when Kareem stepped away to take a call. With him gone, the room seemed to darken around the edges. The men leaned into one another, whispering in tones too low to understand, but heavy enough for Arya to feel the tension through the sound alone. Olivia pretended to focus on the menu, pretending she wasn't noticing the shift, pretending she wasn't counting the seconds until Kareem returned. When he finally did, his smile looked the same, but his eyes didn't. Something behind them felt strained. She pushed the thought away quickly, reminding herself this man had given her daughter an opportunity she could never repay. She told herself she was being dramatic. She told herself she was just tired. But later, as she stepped into the hallway to fix her makeup, she heard Kareem's voice. Not the gentle version she knew, not the calm cadence that made her trust him. This voice was low, tense, controlled. A man's voice responded, "Time is moving. You made a promise." Olivia froze. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the weight they carried. And when Kareem came back to the dining room, wiping his hands on a cloth napkin and pretending nothing had happened, she stared at him longer than she meant to. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He simply smoothed the moment over with that same reassuring presence she'd grown comfortable with. Arya, sensitive to tone shifts, felt everything sharper. She leaned toward her mother quietly and said nothing, but her grip told its own story. She didn't want to ruin her mother's happiness. She didn't want to be the reason Olivia lost this sliver of hope. So she swallowed her discomfort, held her mother's hand, and kept silent. Dinner dragged on. Every toast, every smile, every polite question felt rehearsed. Olivia tried to focus on the positive. She tried to believe this night was meant to celebrate Arya's achievements. But the comments, the whispered questions, the way those men kept looking at her daughter, it all pressed against her like static she couldn't shake. She hadn't felt this protective since Arya was a toddler learning to navigate the world one step at a time. The feeling rose instinctively, but she pushed it down, telling herself she didn't want to offend Karim or jeopardize the opportunities he was giving them. The car ride home felt quiet, too quiet. Arya rested her head against the window, her fingers tapping lightly, a rhythm she used when she was trying to calm herself. Olivia noticed. She asked if her daughter was okay. Arya nodded, not wanting to add weight to an already heavy night. Olivia let the answer settle, though it didn't feel complete. When they reached their apartment, Olivia expected a simple goodnight text from Karim, something polite, something warm. Instead, her phone buzzed with a message that sent a ripple through her chest. "We should talk about Dubai soon. There are important steps ahead." It wasn't the message itself, it was the timing. The tone. The way the word steps felt like something she wasn't sure she understood. She stood by her window long after Arya went to bed, staring at the message glowing on her screen. She tried to make sense of her unease, tried to tell herself it was nothing, tried to believe she was reading too much into a long day. But her instincts stirred. For the first time, she wondered if she'd been so eager for support that she'd ignored a shift happening right in front of her. How do you protect your child when the danger isn't loud? It's polite, patient, and standing right beside the person you thought you could trust. In the days after the dinner, life didn't suddenly twist into chaos. Instead, it shifted quietly, like someone rearranging a room while you're half asleep, subtle enough not to alarm you, but noticeable enough to make you squint. That's how Karim's influence deepened, not with force, with ease. He began taking charge of Arya's transition, stepping into conversations Olivia had always handled. At first it seemed helpful. A man accustomed to international business, offering to smooth out the rough edges for a single mother who'd been fighting alone for 15 years. He told Olivia that to secure Arya's placement, the program required confidentiality. He said too many voices made processes messy. He encouraged her to limit conversations with people outside their trusted circle. The word trusted sank into her chest and stayed there. When he gently suggested she stop updating certain friends because loose talk attracts misunderstanding, she didn't push back the way she normally would. She was tired. She wanted clarity. And Karim offered clarity with the confidence of someone who had never struggled a day in his life. Then came the moment that should have given her pause, but didn't. A meeting with Arya's school counselor had been on her calendar for weeks. Olivia planned to discuss accommodations before the scholarship transition. The night before, Karim told her he'd already handled it. "These people respect authority," he said softly. "Let me take the lead. You've carried enough." He said it in a way that made questioning him feel like doubting her own worth. And for once, she allowed herself the luxury of rest. But what she didn't see was the counselor's confusion when she wasn't present, the quiet removal of her name from the process. With one small shift, Karim had replaced Olivia in a space where she had always stood firmly. And the most dangerous part was how gentle he made it feel. Arya sensed these changes long before her mother did. She felt them in his tone, measured, warm when directed at Olivia, firmer when directed at her. She noticed how he now answered questions meant for her. How his descriptions of her future sounded rehearsed, as if someone else was listening. She heard the way he took over conversations about her education, turning her into a passenger instead of a participant. For a blind girl, the world was built on sound, and lately the sounds around Karim didn't match the comfort her mother felt. Even his footsteps gave him away. When he ended certain calls, the rhythm of his stride changed. Faster, sharper, more purposeful. Arya didn't know what it meant, but the uncertainty curled tight in her stomach. Karim's phone calls grew more frequent. Olivia would hear him in the hall, his voice low and clipped, switching languages in the middle of sentences. She couldn't understand the words, but she understood tension. Every time she approached, he softened instantly, as if he could flip a switch inside himself. "Just business," he'd say with a tired smile. "Stress comes with the territory." And because Olivia was desperate to believe in this man, in this future, she accepted the explanation. Questioning him felt cruel after everything he'd given them. But cracks were forming. Small ones she ignored, tiny fractures that would later shatter their world. He began showing up unannounced, claiming he needed signatures. Olivia signed papers quickly, trusting his explanations about timelines and protocols. She didn't notice that none of the papers were copies she was allowed to keep. She didn't see how smoothly he directed her attention. She didn't realize she had stopped asking follow-up questions. And that was the point where dependency took root. Still quiet, still gentle, still wrapped in velvet. His associates appeared more often too. Men who lingered near cars, men who nodded at Kareem with urgency in their eyes, men who whispered just out of earshot. Arya picked up more than Olivia did. She felt the shift in the air when they entered a room. She heard their silence, heavy, expectant, almost pulsing with pressure. One afternoon, she heard one of them ask, "Is the timeline still intact?" Kareem lowered his voice too quickly, and that reaction alone told her the question mattered deeply. But when her mother walked in, he greeted her with warmth so convincing it erased the tension like chalk from a board. The turning point came when the plane tickets arrived. They weren't emailed. They were hand-delivered, 3 printed documents with embossed seals and clear instructions. Dubai looked so official on that paper it almost glowed. Olivia held the tickets with trembling hands, overwhelmed with gratitude. Her voice broke as she thanked Kareem, as she thanked God, as she thanked the universe for finally giving her daughter a shot at life. She didn't see how Kareem watched her expression instead of the tickets. She didn't see that he was studying her reaction the way someone studies a lock before turning the key. Arya touched the tickets lightly, feeling the edges. Listening to her mother's excitement fill the room. It should have felt like a beginning. Instead, it felt like standing on a ledge. Something in her resisted, something wordless and urgent, but she swallowed it because she didn't want to crush the joy in her mother's voice. For 15 years, Olivia had suffered for her. Maybe this was her mother's moment to breathe. But that night, as Olivia folded clothes into a suitcase, humming softly from relief, Arya moved toward the hallway and froze. Kareem was on the phone again, this time only feet away. His voice didn't have a hint of softness. "Confirm everything before we land," he said. "There can't be delays." Arya's breath caught. Those words didn't sound like preparation for a school evaluation. They sounded like preparation for something she couldn't name but felt deep in her bones. What happens when the path you thought led to opportunity begins to sound like a countdown, and you're the only one who hears it? The countdown began the moment Kareem whispered that everything would be ready before they landed, though Olivia didn't hear that part. Only Arya did. And she carried those words with her on the 14-hour flight to Dubai, gripping them the way a drowning girl grips anything that floats. Olivia slept most of the way, her head resting lightly on Arya's shoulder, convinced she had finally stepped into a life where struggle wasn't waiting around every corner. Arya didn't sleep. She listened, to the shift in Kareem's breathing, to the way he answered messages in low tones, to the tension wrapped beneath his politeness. She didn't know what was waiting for them on the other side of the world, but she knew enough to feel afraid. Dubai unfolded beneath them with breathtaking beauty, a city that looked carved from gold and glass. Olivia pressed her face to the plane window, whispering, "Baby, look at this," forgetting for a moment that her daughter couldn't. But Arya smiled anyway, pretending to share the wonder because it made her mother glow in a way she hadn't seen in years. When they stepped into the airport, the heat wrapped around them instantly, thick and warm. A private driver waited at the gate, greeting them by name, guiding them into a car so smooth and quiet it felt unreal. Olivia held Arya's hand, practically vibrating with hope. Arya sat still, listening to the city move around them, noticing how the driver's tone shifted when he spoke to Kareem, more formal, more obedient. She caught the subtle change. Olivia didn't. The penthouse sat high above Dubai, with windows stretching floor to ceiling and a view that made Olivia cover her mouth in awe. She whispered, "We're safe here." Believing it with her whole heart, Arya traced the edge of a marble counter, feeling the coldness under her fingertips, the vastness of the space, and something quieter. Something that felt like distance. The air behaved differently in this home. Sound settled quickly, as if the walls swallowed it. She followed her mother's voice to orient herself, but even that felt muted under the weight of luxury she couldn't see. Karim moved through the rooms easily, a man perfectly at home, and for the first time Arya realized they were not stepping into their world, they were stepping into his. The first day passed in gentle arrangements, meals delivered, appointments confirmed, staff moving silently through hallways. Olivia relaxed more than she had in years, letting her shoulders drop, letting her guard soften, letting herself believe she had finally found someone who wanted nothing but the best for her daughter. And that belief is exactly what blinded her from what came next. On the second morning, Karim told Olivia that Arya needed to begin her pre-evaluations. He said these sessions were essential for the European program. He said they required privacy, focus, and patience. Olivia nodded, grateful he had a plan. Arya remained quiet, her stomach tightening at the thought of being alone with him. She remembered the way his tone changed in Atlanta. She remembered the last whisper she heard before the flight. But she didn't want to alarm her mother, not when she saw how much this new life meant to her. In the evaluation room, the door clicked shut behind them. The sound made Arya's pulse jump. Karim guided her to sit, his hand resting on her shoulder longer than necessary. He asked questions at first, about mobility, independence, confidence levels. She answered carefully. His tone carried no warmth. When he shifted closer, she leaned away instinctively. That's when he corrected her posture with a firm grip, repositioning her like she was something he owned. She froze. Then came the moment she'd feared without knowing how to name it. He began touching her in ways that had nothing to do with evaluation, nothing to do with education. She tried to pull away, but his voice cut through the room like a blade. "Stay still, Arya." Calm, controlled, certain. She couldn't see his face, but she felt the change in the air. She felt the danger in his breath. When he finished, she sat trembling, her hands shaking so violently she had to tuck them into her lap. When they rejoined Olivia, Karim answered every question first. She did well. She's adjusting. He never gave Arya space to speak. When she opened her mouth, he placed a gentle hand on her back, guiding her forward as if helping her walk, but really silencing her. Olivia, overwhelmed by gratitude, didn't notice the tremor in her daughter's hands or the stiffness in her movements. She only saw progress. She only heard Karim's reassurance. She had no reason, in her mind, to think otherwise. The second session was worse. Karim locked the door. Not loudly, not aggressively. Just a small, deliberate click that told Arya there was no one coming in, and she wasn't leaving until he allowed it. When she flinched, he leaned in and whispered the threat that would hold her hostage far more effectively than the lock. "If you tell your mother anything, she loses everything. The scholarship, the apartment, the support, all of it disappears." Her breath caught. He continued, "You know what she's been through. You want her to keep this new life, don't you?" Arya nodded through tears she couldn't stop. He used her love for her mother as a leash. Every touch that followed was justified with the same poison. Don't ruin this for her. From the outside, Dubai looked perfect. Olivia woke each morning grateful, certain she had made the right choice. She walked through the penthouse like a woman finally allowed to exhale. She had no idea her daughter was walking the same halls with her fists clenched, listening for danger, praying for a moment to speak, but terrified of tearing down the life her mother finally had. It happened on a quiet afternoon, the kind where nothing feels wrong until everything shatters at once. Olivia was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared tea, letting herself enjoy a calm she hadn't tasted in years, when Arya's scream cut through the penthouse like glass. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to pull every drop of blood from Olivia's face. She ran toward the sound and found her daughter crumpled on the floor, shaking, her hands pressed instinctively against her stomach. Karim appeared a moment later, too quickly, too calm, insisting she was just overwhelmed, just tired, just adjusting. But Olivia saw something in her daughter's trembling that didn't match his explanation. Panic surged through her as she lifted Arya's limp body into her arms, her mind racing with fear, guilt, and a sense that something had been wrong for longer than she admitted. Karim offered to call a private doctor, but Olivia ignored him and demanded a hospital. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't wait for his guidance. She carried her daughter to the elevator herself, whispering reassurance through tears while Karim trailed behind them with a tension he tried too hard to hide. At the hospital, machines beeped rhythmically, nurses moved with quiet urgency, and Olivia sat beside the bed gripping Arya's hand, begging her to wake up. She didn't notice Karim pacing behind her, except to feel his presence like a heavy shadow. When the doctor walked in, Olivia braced herself for bad news, but not the kind she received. The words landed like a blow to the chest. "Your daughter is pregnant." Time stopped. Sound thinned. Olivia stared blankly, unable to breathe, unable to process anything beyond the single fact that felt impossible. Arya was 15. Arya was blind. Arya was her baby. She felt her knees weaken and grabbed the side of the bed to steady herself. The doctor kept talking, asking questions, explaining symptoms, but she heard nothing except the echo of those words repeating over and over. Pregnant. 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 Her world cracked. When Arya woke, Olivia leaned over her, voice trembling, asking gently, begging softly, "Who did this?" Arya's reaction told the truth before she said a single word. Her face tightened, her breath shook, her hands curled into fists so small they looked like they were trying to hide inside themselves. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she shook her head as if trying to push the truth back down her throat. Olivia wiped her tears and whispered, "Baby, talk to me. I'm here. You're safe. You have to tell me." And then Arya broke. The confession tore out of her in pieces, each word trembling under the weight of fear and guilt she had been carrying alone. She told her mother what happened in the evaluation rooms. She told her how he touched her, how he threatened her, how he controlled her with a soft voice and hard promises. She told her that he said speaking up would destroy everything, her scholarship, their home, their new life, the roof over their heads. She admitted she stayed quiet because she thought silence was protecting the woman who had sacrificed everything for her. Olivia felt each revelation like a stab. Her heart cracked open with grief so fierce she couldn't breathe. She wrapped her daughter in her arms, sobbing silently into her hair, feeling rage ignite inside her with every word. Karim stood outside the door, trying to appear concerned, but Olivia couldn't even bear to look at him. She finally understood why Arya had grown quieter, why her smile had faded, why her laughter no longer reached its old depth. She finally understood why something always felt off, even when she pushed the feeling away. It wasn't cultural differences, it wasn't stress, it wasn't transition. It was him. It had always been him. The guilt hit next, heavy enough to bend her forward. She blamed herself for believing in him, for letting him close, for trusting his promises, for not seeing what her daughter felt long before she could explain it. She thought about the dinners, the appointments, the paperwork she signed without reading closely, the nights she slept peacefully while her daughter lay awake carrying a secret that was suffocating her. The shame wrapped around her throat like a rope. She whispered, "I'm sorry," into Arya's hair again and again, as if apology could erase the pain. She wanted to scream. She wanted to rip the room apart. She wanted to tear something, break something, burn something. Instead, she held her daughter, rocking gently, while her own tears fell like a storm she couldn't stop. When the nurses stepped out, Olivia stood slowly, her entire body shaking. Not with fear, but with something harder, something sharper, something rising in her chest that she had never felt before. A mother's rage. She wiped her face with trembling hands and looked at her daughter, taking in every detail of her pain. Then she turned toward the door. Her voice was low, steady, terrifying in its quietness when she said, "I'll be back." She walked through the hospital hallways like a woman stripped of illusion, every step powered by a fire she had no intention of putting out. Because this wasn't just about a pregnancy, it wasn't just about betrayal. It wasn't just about the lies, the manipulation, the threats. This was about a man who touched her daughter, violated her daughter, used her daughter, and tried to hide behind wealth and generosity while doing it. What happens when a mother who has spent her entire life fighting to protect her child finally realizes the real danger was standing in her living room the whole time? Olivia stepped out of the hospital with new eyes and a storm in her chest. She returned to the penthouse that night with a silence that scared even her. Olivia walked through the lobby without hearing the music or the soft greetings from the staff. All she felt was the weight of her daughter's confession pressing against her ribs like something trying to claw its way out. When she stepped inside the penthouse, everything looked the same. The marble floors, the scent of expensive candles, the soft city lights painting the windows. But the room didn't breathe the same way anymore. It didn't feel like safety. It felt like the stage where her child's life had been twisted into something she never saw coming. Kareem was asleep in the master bedroom, a fact that should have brought her relief, but only fueled the fire rising in her chest. She stood by Arya's door, listening to the soft rhythm of her daughter's breathing, reminding herself of why she needed to keep moving. She couldn't fall apart yet. Not here. Not while the man responsible slept in the next room. Olivia stepped into the living area, her hands shaking as she looked around with new eyes. She wasn't searching for misplaced items or suspicious objects. She was looking for answers. For the truth behind the mask he had crafted with money, charm, and a steady smile that once felt like hope. She noticed something she hadn't before. A sleek black tablet half hidden under a stack of business folders on the console table. It wasn't the device he used around them. This one looked heavier, older, private. Olivia grabbed it, her breath tightening, and tried the screen. It lit up instantly. No password, no fingerprint lock. Almost as if Kareem believed no one would ever dare touch it. Inside she found files, hundreds of them, organized in coded categories she didn't recognize. She scrolled slowly at first, then with growing urgency as patterns formed. There were folders labeled placements, transfers, evaluations, and arrivals. But the one that froze her was tucked beneath a category marked with a string of numbers and letters she couldn't decipher. It was a simple name, Arya H. Her hand trembled so hard she nearly dropped the tablet. She opened it. Her daughter's photo appeared first, a high-quality headshot she had never seen. Under it, a profile listing her age, her visual impairment, her developmental notes, her medical status. Further down, a section labeled Value Modifiers. That's where she saw it, the unborn child. Listed not as a person, not as a baby, but as a factor that increased the price. She felt her chest twist, the air leaving her lungs violently as she scrolled through the rest. Forged travel documents in Arya's name. 2 sets of passports, one with her real identity, and one with a fabricated one matching a European academy. Intake forms completed and stamped. Approval logs with signatures she didn't recognize. Communications between Kareem and wealthy buyers discussing timelines, conditions, and payment installments. Every message read like a business exchange, except the product was her daughter. Her knees buckled, and she caught herself on the edge of the table, gripping the surface so hard her fingers burned. She whispered, "Oh God, oh God." But the room swallowed her voice. Her eyes locked on one line near the bottom of the documents. Projected delivery within 72 hours of arrival. The word delivery shattered something inside her. She scrolled further. Payment confirmations, bank transfers, agreements signed. Arya wasn't part of a scholarship. She wasn't part of an education program. She was a promised item in a deal that had already been sealed. Her child, her unborn grandchild, listed like inventory. Every breath hurt, every thought hit like a blade. She felt anger rising so violently she thought it might tear her apart. But beneath that rage was terror. The realization that she and her daughter were trapped in a country they didn't understand, under the roof of a man who could erase them in seconds. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was a structure built long before they ever stepped into his world, and she had walked them right into it. Her hands shook as she backed up slowly, the tablet still glowing in her grip. Her mind raced through every kindness he ever offered, every gentle gesture, every moment he spoke of opportunities and transitions. She replayed Arya's confession, his threats, his control, his pressure, and the puzzle snapped into place. He needed Arya compliant, he needed Olivia grateful, he needed them isolated, and he had achieved all three. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't wipe them. They fell freely as she clutched the tablet to her chest and whispered a promise to herself, a vow rooted deeper than rage, deeper than fear, deeper than anything she had ever felt. I will not let him take her. I don't care what it costs. And for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be utterly alone. No friends from home, no family, no authorities she could trust, no one who would take her side over his. In this city, power belonged to him. Then she froze. Footsteps, slow, heavy, coming down the hallway. The bedroom door creaked open, and Kareem's voice drifted into the silence, low, calm, almost amused. Olivia, what are you doing awake? The tablet dimmed in her hands. She wasn't ready for the man who stepped into that hallway, and she wasn't ready for the choice she would have to make next. Olivia froze where she stood, the tablet still warm against her palms as Kareem stepped into the hallway with that familiar, controlled calm. The man who once offered comfort now looked like someone she had never truly seen before. His voice carried a softness that didn't match the weight pressing on her chest. Couldn't sleep? He asked, as if nothing in their world had changed, as if her daughter hadn't cried in her arms hours ago. Olivia swallowed hard, every bone vibrating as she lifted her eyes to meet his. She whispered, I know. The words came out thin but sharp enough to slice the air between them. He paused, tilting his head slightly, and for the first time since she met him, he didn't pretend confusion. He didn't reach for a lie. He didn't mask anything. Instead, he sighed, almost annoyed, and said, You shouldn't have gone through my things. The admission stole her breath. Not because he confessed, but because he sounded disappointed rather than afraid. He walked closer, bare feet on marble, and glanced toward the tablet. You don't understand how this works, he said quietly. You're reacting like a mother, not someone who sees the bigger picture. The bigger picture. Those words made her stomach twist. She stepped back instinctively, but he followed, easing closer with every sentence. Your daughter is valuable, Olivia. Special. You think I chose her by accident? She flinched. He noticed. He kept going. Blind, young, unclaimed. Do you know how rare that is? His tone stayed steady, like he was explaining business terms instead of tearing apart the life she built with her bare hands. Olivia's grief surged into something hotter, stronger. She stepped forward now, breaking the fear that had been pushing her backward. Her voice quivered but didn't break. She's my child, she said. She's not a thing. She's not yours to take. He smiled, a slow, careless lift of his lips that cut through her like a blade. Everything in this house is mine, he answered, including her future. Her breath hitched. Her fingers tightened around the tablet. He continued, You signed travel documents. You accepted housing. You let me guide her evaluations. You agreed to every step. Every word landed like a chain locking around her wrists. You walked her into this. You put her in my hands, and now you want to act surprised that I used what you offered? Her body shook. Not from fear this time, but from rage building so quickly it scared her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tear at him with everything inside her. But she forced herself to stay steady. Arya needed her calm. Arya needed her thinking clearly. She held her ground and said, You touched her. You threatened her. You hurt her. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. I prepared her, he said, for where she's going. Olivia felt the room tilt. She didn't know people could say things like that without shame, without trembling, without the slightest hint of humanity. Her voice cracked as she whispered, She's pregnant. And he shrugged. That increases her value. Something broke inside her at that moment. Something deep. Something ancient. A mother's instinct sharpened into a force she couldn't hold back anymore. She looked at him, not at the man she once trusted, but at the threat that had been living under her roof, shaping her future without her knowing. The truth hit her so hard she had to grip the counter to keep from collapsing. He wasn't a blessing. He wasn't a miracle. He wasn't even a man with a hidden flaw. He was danger wearing kindness like a mask. Kareem held out his hand for the tablet. Give it to me, he said. You weren't meant to see that. She backed away. He stepped forward. Olivia, don't make this harder. You're in my country. You have no one, no resources, no power. Your daughter belongs to the people I do business with now, not to you. The words slammed into her chest with a force that left her breathless. He reached for her wrist. She jerked away, clutching the tablet against her chest. "I am her mother," she whispered, "and you will not touch her again." He laughed, quiet, dismissive, certain of himself. "You can't stop this," he said. "You're already too late." Those words changed everything. They stripped away whatever fear she still held. They fed the fire she had been holding back since the hospital. She stepped past him, fast and deliberate, moving toward the utility closet where she remembered seeing the gasoline container the staff used for terrace maintenance, a detail she never cared about until now. Kareem followed her, confused for the first time, reaching out to grab her arm, but the look in her eyes stopped him cold. There was nothing fragile left, nothing uncertain. Nothing that could be manipulated, only a mother fueled by a truth too devastating to contain. She unscrewed the cap with shaky hands. The scent hit the air instantly. Kareem's face changed, the first flicker of panic cracking through his confidence. "Olivia," he said, stepping back, "think about what you're doing." She didn't blink. She didn't hesitate. She held the container tightly and said, "You took everything from her. I'm taking everything from you." He lunged forward. She threw the gasoline. The liquid hit the floor, the walls, his robe. Kareem stumbled, shouting as the sharp fumes filled the room. Olivia dropped the empty container and stepped backward, her breath shaking, her heart pounding like it wanted to break out of her chest. The lighter in her hand trembled, but she held it steady. And as she flicked it once, then twice, the night exploded into chaos. When the flames swallowed the penthouse and Kareem's screams echoed against the night sky, Dubai's skyline changed forever. And so did Olivia. Firefighters broke through the smoke, dragging Kareem out of the inferno. His body burned, his pulse faint, his breath shallow. Cameras captured everything, the stretcher racing toward the ambulance, the chaos on the rooftop landing pad, the blur of medical teams fighting for a man the world once admired. Down below, Olivia stood with her hands cuffed behind her back, her clothes stained with soot, her face streaked with ash, her expression carved from shock and something deeper. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She watched the ambulance pull away with the man who nearly stole her daughter's life and felt nothing but the raw, painful truth that she had crossed a line she never imagined she could cross. Police led her through the lobby past crowds, whispering theories she had no strength to refute. Staff stared at her like she was a ghost who'd wandered too far from her story. Reporters shouted questions she couldn't answer. She kept her head down, her breath shallow, her mind replaying the moment Arya said, "He made me promise not to tell." At the station, detectives questioned her for hours. They pressed for motive, intent, sequence, timing. She spoke softly, sometimes barely audible, describing what Kareem did to her child, the threats he used, the fear he planted, the scholarship lie, the pregnancy. But they treated it like story without proof, until the tablet arrived. Investigators in the penthouse had found it half-melted, but salvageable. When they restored the files, everything changed. Transfer logs, buyer codes, forged passports, payment records. A timeline detailing exactly when Arya would be moved, where she would be taken, and how the unborn child increased her worth. The room fell silent. Dubai officials didn't want this exposed. Not the trafficking network. Not the buyers connected to powerful names. Not the fact that a wealthy man slipped through every safeguard. So instead of a long trial, they made a quiet decision, one shaped by politics, international pressure, and the unbearable truth sitting inside that tablet. Olivia was transferred into diplomatic custody. No formal Dubai prosecution. No courtroom showdown. Just hours of tense negotiations, a rush of paperwork, and a silent escort to a plane bound for the United States. When she landed, she wasn't greeted like a returning mother. She was greeted like someone whose story carried weight and danger. Federal officers took her into custody gently but firmly, walking her into a system now responsible for deciding whether she was a murderer, a protector, or something trapped painfully in between. The U.S. trial drew national attention instantly. A mother accused of killing a foreign billionaire in a penthouse fire, a blind pregnant teen at the center of it all, and a trafficking network uncovered only because the suspect lay in a coma thousands of miles away. Arya entered the courtroom holding a cane in one hand and a therapist's reassurance in the other. When she took the stand, the entire room shifted. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. She told them what Karim did. She explained how he convinced her to stay quiet. She described the threats, the pressure, the moments she froze in fear while pretending everything was normal. And then she said the sentence that cracked something open in everyone listening. I didn't stay silent because I trusted him. I stayed silent because I didn't want my mom to lose everything. Lawyers on both sides fell quiet. Jurors stared at her through tears. Even the judge paused, letting the weight of her truth settle over the room. Prosecutors argued that Olivia still committed a violent act. Defense argued that the system failed her long before she ever lifted that lighter. Experts testified about trauma, coercion, desperation. Officials presented the recovered documents. Every page pointed to the same horrifying reality: a mother and daughter targeted because they were vulnerable, isolated, and grateful. During closing arguments, the defense said one line no one forgot. She didn't set that fire because she wanted revenge. She set it because she believed it was the only way to stop a man no one else could stop. As deliberations began, news broke from Dubai. Karim had died. Complications. Organ failure. The fire had taken more than his breath. It had taken the last chance for him to answer to what he built in the shadows. The courtroom fell into an uneasy hush when the verdict returned. Olivia was not labeled a murderer. She was found guilty of a lesser charge, one acknowledging the danger she was in and the fear that drove her decision. She received time served and supervised release rather than prison. Not freedom, but not a cage either. When she walked out of the courthouse, Arya reached toward her instantly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Olivia folded her into her arms, holding her like someone who survived both fire and grief. Someone trying to learn how to breathe again. They returned home to a small apartment in the US, nothing like the sky-high luxury they once lived in. But this place had something the other never did. Safety. Healing didn't come quickly. Some nights Olivia woke panting, hearing glass breaking. Some days Arya paused mid-step, waiting for footsteps that would never return. They rebuilt slowly, with tenderness carved from pain, stitching a life from what they had left. And when the narrator reaches the final moment of this journey, the voice doesn't rise with judgment. It rises with the quiet force of truth, the kind that stays long after the screen fades to black. Because this story isn't about fire. It isn't about wealth. It isn't about the courtroom. It's about a mother standing at the last edge of hope, a daughter caught in a nightmare she never asked for, and a question that refuses to let go. If your child's life hung in the balance, and no one was coming to save them, what choice would you have made? Some stories remind us how fragile safety can be, how trust, once misplaced, can cost more than anyone can repay. But they also remind us of something deeper, something raw and universal. A parent's love is powerful, sometimes dangerously so. It can push people to rise, to shield, to sacrifice, and in the darkest moments, to do things they never thought themselves capable of. This case forces us to confront a truth that doesn't fit neatly into laws or verdicts. When institutions fail, when danger hides behind wealth, when a child's life is on the line between justice and survival blurs. And every one of us is left to ask ourselves not what Olivia did, but what we would have done if we were standing in her shoes. And as this chapter of their lives closes, one truth lingers long after the fire goes out. Danger doesn't always look like a stranger. Sometimes it enters your home with open hands and a smile that feels like salvation. What Olivia faced is every parent's nightmare, and what she did is every parent's impossible choice. If this story moved you, stay close. At Crime Deck, we bring you the cases that force us to look deeper, at justice, at power, at the choices we pray we'll never have to make. Take a moment to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this episode with someone who understands that survival doesn't always look heroic. Sometimes it just looks human. Until the next case, stay aware, stay safe, and hold your loved ones a little closer tonight.